Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Network. Here on The People's Choice, I'm your host, Joe Flint, all one word, like a tribe called Quest. It's so great to be with you today. I encourage you to like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, follow us on every platform that you can find. As been noted, and I've said this many times during the broadcast, the views that are shared on The People's Choice are the views of the host himself and not of the WCEG network. So don't call the network complaining about what Joe Flint said. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us today and being a part of this special segment that we're having this evening. We have two wonderful guests. One of them you know all too well. She is, without a doubt, the watchdog of watchdogs. And ladies and gentlemen, we have not only Demita Chapman, but we have the august president of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP. My grandmother says there's no such thing as a double A. So the NAACP, Mr. Richard Rose. Thank you both for joining us this evening. How are
you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, Demita, you know how we do. So, I'm glad that you're here with me to keep us both focused. Mr. Rose, it's so good to see you. It's been a while since last we spoke, but I greatly appreciate you taking this invitation to come on to the show. You've made some headlines here lately. Normally now you stay in good trouble, but normally you stay out of the limelight in good trouble. But here lately, you have been making some noise, and as old folks say in the song with Carlton Pearson, she said they've been making noise in this place, but it ain't our kind of noise. You've been making some noise here that was well-rounded for the city of Atlanta. Mr. Rose, thank you again. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Every day is a day to be of service.
Yes.
When I make noise, it's serious, and it's always about the benefit of the people. It's never about me personally. That's not why I do this. I have a personal life. I take care of that as well, but I stay out of the limelight unless it's necessary. I mean, Absolutely. And it's good trouble. There are times to be quiet and strategize, which is most of the time.
Yes,
but
sir. There
are other times to be outspoken.
Yes, sir. Well, we appreciate your outspokenness, and we appreciate the leadership that you've been providing for the Atlanta branch of the ACP. It's not an easy task to serve in such a position with so many opposing sides coming at you on a day-to-day basis. And also, I can only imagine how hard it is to be in a nonpartisan organization when so much of you wants to explain and jump out and say much more, which is why, Mr. Rose, I called you to be a part of this show. Demita and I were talking about it, and I couldn't find anybody better to talk about it, better than the person himself who brought it to knowledge. So I'm just going to jump right in here, and Demita's going to join in where she does at all times. Mr. Rose, well, let me do this first. Tell us a little bit about your background, because of course I know that people know who you are, but I want people to know how you came about to joining and becoming the president of the Atlanta branch of the NAACP.
So NAACP has been in my life since I was about 13. I joined the youth council in Memphis, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. I was moved to understand my first real up-close personal confrontation with racism was as a 9-year-old. I had read about zoos in a weekly reader that we had in school. And on my way home with my mother, who was a school teacher, I went to school with her 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And I asked her, I said, Mother, can we go to the zoo this weekend? And she said, no, we have to go to the zoo in the summertime when I'm out of school, because Negroes can only go to the zoo on Thursday. And that was a long ride from where she taught school near downtown Memphis to where we live, sort of suburb. They don't call that suburbs anymore, but it was a difficult conversation that she had, forthright. And I told her then the first opportunity I got to fight against these unjust laws, unjust conditions, I did. And I have, and it's part of my life. I was a volunteer with Atlanta NAACP under John Dale Johnson. I served on the executive committee under Dr. White, and also as treasurer. So this is a continuation of service that I enjoy, have devoted to. It is an honor and privilege to be of service And so that's the other side of my life. I came to Atlanta to Clark College, and to go to college. I'm a practicing certified public accountant, and I have worked in the community in various situations, including president of Clark Atlanta's Athletic Booster Association, and other places. So service is a part of my life.
Background is there. Well, Mr. Rose, when you just mentioned that thing about the zoo, that Negroes weren't allowed to go to the zoo, it made me think of a story. When I was last in the military, my last duty station was in a place called Macomb, Mississippi.
Know it well.
Oh, yeah. And there's a city just 20 miles east of Macomb called Tylertown. And I learned that back in the day, in downtown Tylertown, Mississippi, back during the Jim Crow days, that they would sit Black children on a wall in Tylertown and give them bananas because they called them monkeys in the zoo. They would sit on the wall in Tylertown, Mississippi, and do that. And that kind of ignorance is just crazy to me. So when you told that story about the zoo, that's what came to mind. So, but thank you. Listen, I'm gonna get in here so I can get tag team with Demita here. So listen, I want to know, Mr. Rose, I have to ask you, because it is far pressed for any organization, especially a Black organization, nonpartisan organization. We know, and I don't know if you will admit this, and if you can admit this or not, but we know in most Black African-American organizations that push voting, that push, rights and all of these things, there's an unwritten partisanism that takes place in these organizations. Now, they won't say, that you should vote Democratic, that you should vote Republican, or that you should do this or do that. But I have seen in my years of working with all of these organizations that there is an unwritten rule or unwritten push for a Democratic agenda. And, maybe not all of them, but there's an unwritten rule to push Black, leaders and to push the Democratic ticket and so on and so forth. But here we find you, Mr. Rose, you took it a step further and you decided to voice your opinion about our former mayor, or the former mayor of the city of Atlanta. And that's just unheard of in the NAACP, in any organization, in the PUSH organization, in NAN, in National Urban League. You never see the presidents come up and speak boldly about how they feel about a particular candidate or how they feel about a situation. But you, sir, stepped out and did that. And I want to know, did God come to you late in the night and say to you, Richard Rose, I need you to open your mouth and say something about this former candidate? Tell us how that came about, sir.
Well, we keep up with events and moves from politicians. One of the most disappointing things for me, having started as a teenager, is that we felt like that if we could just get some Black candidates elected to some of these council positions and so forth, that they will protect our communities. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, in a community called Orange Mound, where we didn't have sidewalks, barely paved streets. They were mostly clumps of gravel with tar, not paved at all. White neighborhoods had smooth streets. You could skate down the street. We had to go to the church parking lot to skate. And so to come full circle and see Black politicians who ignore the NAACP and other community organizations take the same white supremacist positions is just it's insulting to me. And so, it was sort of a last straw kind of thing. And again, it's not about party. Local races, city races are nonpartisan in Georgia. And so it's not about party, but it is about policy. And the policies were in direct contradiction to the policies of the NAACP. We promote affordable housing. We promote equal justice. We promote fair taxation. All of these things were clearly not recognized under this previous administration. And it's also, I understand that I I didn't endorse. And so I thought it was all right too. Since there are 14 people in the race, I said, well, I'll take a chance to say, this is not good for us. And even that was rejected. So I'm fine with that. I will continue to promote policies that make a difference in Black lives because, we started out behind. Every system that we operate in America is racist. It's tinged with racism. It was conceived with racism in mind. And unless and until politicians, particularly Black politicians, but also white politicians, unless they recognize the inherent discriminatory nature of these systems and move to change them, then they are part of the same racist structure that we recognize today. We have to make a change. We cannot continue to go along to get along and for personal gain. We see too much personal gain.
Well, President Rose, thank you. You didn't kind of walk down my aisle. Now, let me ask you this, because what I've noticed, elected leaders have kind of gotten away from policies and procedures. That's all really what they're supposed to do, is policies and procedures, like on the city council, correct?
Well, yeah, the city councils are the legislative branch of a city. We all kind of, judicial, executive, legislative. The city council is a legislative branch. And those policies and procedures, as you mentioned, are born out of legislation in the form of resolution and ordinances.
Right.
And when they are we hold on to those same ones that are unfair, then we continue to perpetuate white supremacy and racism that we know.
But don't you, and Joe, I'll give it back to you shortly, but don't you see right now in the races, it ain't basically what you know, is who you know, and you can have a politician like, I'm gonna use Kasim Reed, that they know he's wrong, he's been corrupt, but yet they'll continue on putting him in office just because he Kasim Reed. You see it now in all of it. Do you agree with me?
I see it all over. There was a rally today with the Peoplestown residents who were displaced and continue, and one received a final eviction notice Friday. At the same time they were having that rally, there was a press conference with Kasim Reed, Carla Smith, who's a council person in Atlanta. She represents the Peoplestown area. She's not running for re-election. And also Michael Julian Bond, who's the son of Julian Bond. I mean, a legendary civil rights figure, one of the founders and the early officers in SNCC, one of the founders of Southern Poverty Law Center, a previous chairman of the board of NAACP. And he was at this same meeting, still perpetuating the unjust actions of former Mayor Reed when he was mayor. And let's be clear, the current Atlanta mayor could do something about those situations right now. Without another piece of legislation, Atlanta's a strong mayor system. She can make a difference right now.
Why haven't she stepped in?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
I know her and the former mayor used to be tight buddies when we were fighting for cityhood. Is they still tight, or that's just the show that they putting on, like, they in disagreement? Is that just a show?
Yeah, I don't know. What I know is that the policies are unjust. They victimize poor people, and I will continue to advocate against them.
Mr. Rose, President Rose, you mentioned something that, or you mentioned an individual, but just in general, you mentioned something that has always been a plague or a thorn in my flesh. And I said this last week when I joined DeMita, is that, in the metro Atlanta area, specifically Atlanta, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because it is an unfortunate situation, the leaders in Atlanta, as far as our civil rights leaders, minus, the organizations such as the NAACP, but our elected officials generally are the children or maybe even the grandchildren. We see a lot of them from the civil rights leaders, that we had in Atlanta. And, they get elected to these seats and these positions because of their names and because of, what their parents did, not so much about what they did, but what their parents did. Mm-hmm. And to your point, we see the same perpetual unjust laws and policies continue to be set forward. And the thing to me that I say is that's unfortunate is that these people know the struggle, and yet they refuse to do anything to combat that struggle or to make Atlanta work for all Atlantans. This may not be the right statement to make, and I don't live in the city limits anymore, but I have said, President Rose, that it's time that Atlanta not have a Black mayor, because they have not always shown the support and the needed change to take place in the Metro Atlanta area. And here we find, to your statement, the perpetual cycle, the cycle of perpetual panhandling of African-American votes and people in the communities, and they're not being, taken care of. You mentioned about the fact that, where you grew up, there were no sidewalks. We have broken sidewalks all over Atlanta in city council districts where these individuals run every year saying that they're going to make change, but yet the only thing they will update is a sidewalk, but nothing else will be done. I can think of many areas in Atlanta where they've changed the sidewalk, but they hadn't done anything else to beautify the area or to bring businesses or to get rid of those unjust policies. How does the NAACP combat that type of issue?
Well, we do it every day, 1 hour at a time. And so I'm not ready to abandon Black mayorship. That's on the politics.
That's why I said that's me.
But I am willing to abandon the policies that have been promulgated under many of these mayors, in particular our current mayor and former Mayor Reed.
Yes.
The last public housing units in Atlanta, Atlanta Housing Authority, which is a function of the city, the mayor appoints those directors, owns over 600 acres in the city of Atlanta, where housing could be erected, affordable housing could be erected. The last units were commissioned and started under Shirley Franklin. So we got 12 years, at least 12 years since a new housing unit has been commissioned. It's unreasonable, and I have to cling to Maynard Jackson, who was bold and said, yeah, we need a new airport, but unless Black contractors and Black business owners are able to not only build this airport, but operate businesses in this airport, we just won't have a new airport.
But Mr. Rose, what happened after that, under other administrations, is it didn't open contracts for them. They started open contracts for fogies and their buddies.
They did, and that's a function of politics, which is not. This is the good thing about it that I see. Even though they picked the people who were on the contract, they still gave other Black people, Black men and women, jobs that they would not have had. They gave them opportunities in management that they would not have had. They educated some children, got them through college when they might not have been able to. There was still some benefit to that. And so we don't want to, what we want to do is fix the brokenness. But we don't want to throw out a system that Maynard Jackson created, and let me say this. A few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, a young man who's a politician in Fulton County, just running for office, asked me, he said, President Rose, it seems to me that politicians nowadays are different from those, when you were younger.
Right.
And I said, that's true. And this is the difference. In the 60s and 70s, Black politicians were selected before they were elected. They had a relationship with the community. Q.V. Williamson, the first politician, the first elected alderman in Atlanta, was a life member of the NAACP. He was a resident of Atlanta. He was a Morehouse graduate. He had an MBA from Atlanta University. He was a part of the community. John Calhoun used to be the president of the Atlanta NAACP. So we had people who were, you know, who had all established relationships with the community before they went into politics. Same for Leroy Johnson, the first Black senator in Georgia since Reconstruction.
So, Reverend, so President Rose, it almost sounds like you're talking about the preachers, the pastors. Were back in the day when I was coming up, the pastor had a relationship with the community.
Right.
Now, you
they're
might
on TV.
They're on billboards. They on TV or they you can't touch them. So I hear what you're saying. What do you guys have a plan on trying to fix the problem that's going on? Because like tomorrow is election.
Well,
and you got a lot of folks that's running that.
A lot.
Well, what we have to do is, first of all, it starts with speaking out, and I've done that. And so what we have to do is follow that up with action, follow that up with communication, follow that up with collaboration, so that the community becomes more cohesive at this point. You know, there's a line in Lift Every Voice and Sing, you know, by James Weldon Johnson. And then he says, lest our hearts stray from the place where we met thee. Lest we drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Now that's not only talking about the God we serve, but he's talking about the community.
Absolutely.
You know, because I mean that song, it's a song of celebration, it's a prayer, it's a protest song, all in one. You know,
I use it as a prayer quite often, President Rose. I have to ask you this. So, you know, we started this talking about your outspokenness, which I greatly applaud you for that.
Absolutely.
So, and not so much about the candidate specifically, although I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of him, but about the fact that you had the ability, or you had the fortitude to do so. But Mr. Rose, upon doing that, you know, you received some backlash from the national office. Did we lose you? Did we lose Mr. Rose?
No, I'm here.
Okay. There was some backlash from the national office. And have you had and I don't know if you can tell us this, but have you had a conversation with President Johnson, you know, specifically, or was it just a letter that they sent to you, you know, asking you to cease and desist your statements? And again, you didn't endorse a candidate, you just spoke out against a specific candidate.
So no, I've not had a conversation with National President Johnson either before or after. And so that's unfortunate, but that's life. I mean, you have to move on. I'm not into grudges. My feelings not hurt, because I work for the community through the NAACP. I don't work for the NAACP. My accounting practice that gives me my income. That allows me to take off the time to do these things, like this interview, like that rally today, like other things. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the ability to do that. And I will continue to focus on the mission.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Rose.
Yes, sir.
The Article 2, Section 2D says of the bylaws of the NAACP states that all political action shall be nonpartisan and shall not endorse candidates for public office. Furthermore, Article 8, Section 5P of the bylaws for the units of the NAACP states that political action committee shall be nonpartisan, shall not endorse candidate for public office. Now, they use this particular insert in their letter to you to emphasize, or at least what I read from it is they were emphasizing your endorsement of a candidate, but you didn't endorse.
But you didn't endorse.
Well, whether their rules
of this statement, there's no real background to that.
Well, let me say this. Life goes on, the work goes on. Yes. And I'm not going to get into a match about that. Understood. The way they interpret it is that I actually endorsed the other 13 candidates. And so, I'm just, man, we have work to do. We got election tomorrow.
Yeah.
Turnout is very low. And we working on reaching out to promote turnout. That's what we're doing. We're gonna continue to do that. And it is what it is.
Now I'm gonna let Demita come back in, but let me ask this question. Do you think that, because what you did was radical, and I love it, like, again, kudos to you. But do you think that your ability to step out there and to do something that no previous president in any organization of this magnitude has done in recent years, do you think that you have given somebody else a voice that didn't have a voice? Because again, we understand that, a lot of these national boards conduct, and some people, and not you, Mr. Rose, and I won't even say that Dr. White, but some people believe that these national boards with local offices have people as puppets, that they're doing what they want them to do. Mm-hmm. But I think, and not saying that you were a puppet, but your statement and my ability cut the strings from the puppetry that takes place in some of these organizations. And so with that, do you believe that you have, given another president, maybe SCLC's president, and I'm not naming anybody, but just any other organization's president, the opportunity to say, you know what, I will speak up and speak out, not specifically against anyone, but against the policies, because that's what your statement was about, the policies of that particular individual. But do you think that you've given somebody else the gumption to do the same?
I don't have an answer for that, but I do this for service for the community. 7 years ago when we stepped out and said they need to move those faces off of Stone Mountain because they're racist, they celebrate white supremacy. And I learned, I'm a student of civil rights movement. One of my mom's first cousin was a founder of SCLC with Dr. King. And so I was, young doing it. And the King's strategy was to find the biggest bully on the block and hit him in the mouth. And that's what I did. And I have to say,
he is a bully.
They haven't moved those on the mountain. They're still talking about it, but monuments have been falling all over the South.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that. Now Atlanta has moved one, but Memphis, New Orleans, Birmingham, Charlottesville, Conyers, Waycross, Dalton, Georgia. I mean, all over the South, all over. It has started, and the bases, the military bases that have been named for Confederate generals are being changed. So change that I've been able to effect change is gratifying for me. I'm going to always be on the side of the people, what I think the side of the people. And I don't do this, it's not at spur of the moment, it's with great consideration. It is to consider a strategy about how it will affect the community and others going on. What I hope that local politicians understand, and I hope that NAACP leaders across this country will understand, is they need to speak out, and I will speak out when I see them operating adverse to the interests of the community. I will do that.
That's huge. That's huge.
That's huge. That's huge. That's huge. I like that, President Roach. Let me ask you a question. With these elections that's going on now, and you see so many, just say in Atlanta race, you got with 13 running for one
14.
seat, 14.
Oh, and one write-in. It's 15.
Oh, one write-in.
Yes.
So my thought process is really they're going to divide the votes.
Right.
The Black votes.
They're going to divide all of it.
Okay, they're going. Could you see maybe, if not this election, but the next election, somebody else running Atlanta besides us? Because you can see it happening already. They're moving all the people out. They can't afford it. They're building all the high rise. So where are all those people going now? I just come through, I think the West End. It's horrible. People laying all out in the street, out in the, under the bridges. It's horrible for us to be, they say we the blackest city, but the way we treat our Black folks down here make me wonder. So what kind of plan y'all got to help with that big problem? Because it's a problem.
Well, let me say this right now. The Black voters make up 47% of Atlanta's electorate right now, 47%. And so I don't think, now there are other races involved too. So it's just, I think whites make up less than 50% too. So the vast majority of the voters in Atlanta are either non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic Black people. And so I don't think it's out of the question that a white candidate, we can look at the last election. So the last election, when Keisha Lance Bottoms won, Mary Norwood came in second, Kathy Woolard came in third. And so I think that clearly, I think people have to look at they got to look beyond the skin color, because Black people cannot be racist. Okay, racism infers that you believe that you are inferior because of your race. Has nothing to do with racial discrimination. But Black people can be white supremacists. They can also believe that white people are superior by their actions. I mean, we see that, when I came out, it was like July of 2015, we made the first announcement with SCLC against Stone Mountain and monuments. That following January, Ambassador Andrew Young came out on the side of maintaining Stone Mountain.
I remember that.
And that's white supremacy all over it.
I call it sellout.
Well, but Mr. Rose, kind of to that point, that kind of goes back to your statement about the perpetual placement of policy. We see that all too often in some of our Black leaders. They have become so, and I use this example, and people get mad at me, and I does not care. But before President Obama became famous on the ticket to run for office, then Senator Obama, we remember very well that John Lewis was 100% behind Hillary Clinton to become president. But then when Hillary kind of got booted out and President Obama got in there, John Lewis, I won't say jumped ship, but he sure stepped over to get on President Obama's bandwagon. And not the exact same thing, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah. We see that in our leaders quite often. We see that.
Well, you have to. I mean, the circumstances are a little different. Obama was new. He had served in his first term as senator. John Lewis had a relationship with Clinton for decades. Yeah. But when he recognized that his 5th district was definitely for Obama, he changed to align himself with the people he served. I think that was the right thing to do. But I have to tell you, my mother, life member of the NAACP, working in NAACP, she died in 2008, and she died in March, Easter Sunday 2008. And I was telling her, I was at home one time, and I said, "Wow, this guy Obama, I think he has a chance to win." I said, because he won Iowa. Yeah. We got more Black folk in Collier Heights than he in the whole state of Iowa.
That's the truth. That is true.
And she said, "You think so?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, I sure hope they don't kill it." That was the only thing came out of her mouth. And she was I lost her later on after that conversation. But yeah, we Obama was a strike of lightning. It was a good time. But America has punished us for having elected Obama.
Oh yeah,
punished Black folk.
Oh yeah.
And Joe, I'm gonna tell you when you said that about the Clintons, I'm gonna tell you I was a Clinton fan. Yeah. I did not support President Obama. I'm gonna be honest. And then after Clinton, Hillary, you know, she lost. I had to go on and.
Well, I mean, by then you didn't have
Yeah.
much of a choice, but
Yeah.
I remember how that change happened. And he went over and he was supporting them. But Mr. President Rose, you know, when you mentioned that about, you know, how some Black people can be white supremacists as well, I think about when I was growing up, my great grandmother, who is from the Dixie Hills community, Collier Heights community, you know, I can remember that in her room, and you've probably seen this in a lot of Black people's houses in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even the early 90s, but there were 3 pictures that hung on the wall.
Martin Luther King,
Martin Luther King, John Kennedy,
Kennedy.
Hung there. And you know, you couldn't speak against John Kennedy,
Oh,
you know,
no.
for Black people at all. And so, you know, I think about that when you made that statement. And not, again, nothing against John Kennedy. You know, he did the things that were, you know, needed for that time. But you could definitely see, and again, that was for that time, but you could definitely see how that generation, you know, speaking of Andy Young, they have just become, you know, comfortable with things, and they just go along with it sometimes.
Well, not all of them. Now, let's be clear.
Not all of them.
Yeah, not all of them. I mean, I know, you know, there are not a lot of them left, you know, who were prominent in that time. Diane Nash, of course, is still alive and working in Chicago. Bernard Lafayette retired from Emory, and he's in Alabama somewhere. And you know, there's a few left. You know, I had to tell a local mayor. She asked me about Andy Young, and I said to her, probably matter of factly in my accounting way, that the next protest that Andy Young leads will be his first, and that's a fact.
Wow.
Wow. Can't hear you, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, I can't hear you either.
Until he come back with his voice, President Rose, let me ask you a question, and you can answer this. What I see now is going on with a lot of politicians. They're selling out.
Yeah, they are.
They're not really. It's not about the community no more. They're selling out, and then you got the different churches and the pastor. They getting behind people that they know are not for the community. Help me understand. What do you know, kind of address that? What do you stand with that? It's all about the money now.
Yeah, in a word, is narcissism. You can dress that up and quart it and cut it up how you want it, but that's what we're talking about. They forget that they are in service. It's public service, but they forget about that. And so they look to see to serve themselves. And it's not only, you know, I mean, you look at Senator Joe Manchin, you know, up in West Virginia. He went to one of the poorest states in the country, in the whole. I mean, for him to speak out against program that his constituents need, it's just incredible to me.
That's a true. Joe Manchin is a narcissist. He really is, because he holds up the vote more often than never. And I think he does it on purpose now, not even for the sake of political gain. I think he just does it because he knows that it gains him attention. Right. But to your point, you know, his state, his constituents could use almost everying that is being brought forward.
Not almost. They need everything. They need everything. More. I've been to West Virginia 2 or 3 times. And what I wanted to make sure I did is to get out. Let me leave West Virginia. That was on my mind.
But President Rose, if you see now, like we got the elections tomorrow, and you got a lot of these candidates in a lot of these elections, when the voters know that they don't need to be in office, but yet we continue on voting them in because they belong to a certain church, a certain organization. When are we going to say enough is enough?
Well, I don't think it's even that. I think we are not first of all, I think that the presumption that Black politicians are going to serve the Black community is misplaced. we still labor under that presumption. And that's one of the things I want to change. I want to call it out. That they are not doing that. And you know, when you have a politician who decide, a mayor who just decide, I want to make this a park, you know, for some other reason. I want to make this whole block a park in the middle of downtown. No, and I don't care what happens to the residents. He doesn't care. You know, just move, whatever. And I only can pay them so much money. Now I'm going to uproot these people from a neighborhood they love. And you know, I got two personal stories about uprooting people. My favorite aunt, in Memphis, the Memphis owned its own utilities, and they put in some new equipment that had too much power coming into her house, and it basically imploded. Wow. She lost all of her mementos, all her pictures, and she grieved until she died about that loss. I mean, and I've watched her grieve, you know, and she didn't want to be. She lived with her daughter, you know, cousin, my first cousin, and she anything to do to get out because where she could look around the room and see mementos and photos, they were not there anymore. Right. And I remember my mother was a leukemia patient. She died when she was almost 91. I mean, I tried to move her to Atlanta with me. I said, Mom, you know, let me take care of you. And she said, when I leave this house, the undertaker will be in the front yard. She, you know, she didn't want to move. It didn't matter. She would have been moving, living with me. She wanted to be where she was. And so to uproot people, elderly people, is cruel punishment. Yeah. And so I you know, and some people can move, you know, some people do. But our culture where people work hard for it, you know, they didn't have a cabin in the woods. They couldn't take, you know, European vacations. Right. They loved their house. They planted gardens. They planted flowers. They painted this. They put this here. Right. And to take away that is so traumatic. You just can't imagine.
President Rose, what do you see the mission? You know, of course, I know that there is an overall mission statement, you know, for the national and for the Atlanta branch. But what do you see your biggest mission moving forward? You know, we're just a few weeks away from starting a new year, just a few weeks away from the commemoration of the Emancipation Proclamation. What do you see the mission for the Atlanta branch moving forward, in keeping in mind that, you know, you focused on policy, you know, that the leaders aren't, you know, following, or the leaders are enforcing policy that is old and dead? How do you see the Atlanta NAACP being able to push new policy along?
Well, see, I believe in going back to the future, really. Listen, we have everything we need to know. You know, three of the most important civil rights figures in America, Black, had their roots in Atlanta and in the NAACP. Yes. Talking about James Weldon Johnson, wrote "Lift Every Voice and Sing." He was the first field director for the NAACP. He actually ran the NAACP. Walter White, who succeeded James Weldon Johnson, you know, and of course W.B. Du Bois. Yeah. They were very smart people. I don't know that they were geniuses. I never met either one of them. But there's a genius in "Lift Every Voice and Sing," without a doubt. Yes. So they started with education, voting rights, equal justice, and economic opportunity. Added to it health, housing, and environment. If we just focus on those 7 things and promote policies that enhance the prospects of Black and African Americans to live better lives, that should be the mission of not only Atlanta NAACP, but every branch of the NAACP, because it's not my words. Right. It's not my policy. Right. I'm just going with the people who created what we have here, their brand. I'm just following their lead. They led, you know. Now, if other local leaders, if other state leaders, if other national leaders don't follow that brain. Don't follow the same thing I'm following, because I'm just following what the founders did or what the developers did. They need to look in the mirror and decide who they're going to represent. Because I can look in the mirror and I know that what I do is beneficial to the community. You know, we stepped out a lot. You know, let me just say this, Dominique, you can go on, but in 2018, I decided that I looked at the low voter turnout and I decided that we got to do something different to get the voter turnout. And in 2019, I told Karen Renee, who's East Point Council, she was program director, I said, listen, it's not enough that we get the vote out in Fulton County. We have to help get the vote out all over this state.
Right.
And she said, you have lost your mind. She said, we got enough to do right here. I said, but it's not enough. It doesn't matter if it's a big thing. And so we created a collaboration with branches across this state to turn the vote out in November and January, which was out of school a little bit, you know.
Mr. Rose, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I believe in the mission. And sometimes the mission is not accomplished by what they have been doing. And so you have to do something different.
Let me ask you before Joe get in this. What are you guys doing about all the police shootings and the brutality against citizens? Where do you stand? I know you went down to Bronzeworth. Where do you guys stand? Because it looks like they're getting more progressive. So where do you guys stand with that? And let me ask you this. Do you guys support the police union?
We absolutely, let me ask the last question first. Absolutely not. The Klan, a friend of mine is a retired policeman. He was at Clark when I was there. He said, I mentioned the police union. He said, well, you talking about the Klan. You know, that's the way he looks at it. And so, but we continue to speak out against police brutality. And the only difference now is that we have cell phones who record these things and body cameras. Their conduct is not worse. It may be a tad better. We just see it now. Yeah, we can, right. You know, you think that, and it's never, when you see situation that result in death, like with Garrett Rolfe, who killed Rayshard Brooks, and Derek Chauvin, who killed George Floyd, they are not their first, that's not their first experience with brutality. Yeah, they experienced that. They continue. So it's over. The system is bad. And you know, it's one of the criticisms I had with Kasim Reed is that as close as he was to Obama, he did not adopt Obama's 21st century policing policy for the Atlanta Police Department. He could have, but he didn't. Still not in Atlanta. So we gotta do a lot of things better. And of course, I don't think that one went far enough, but at least you have to start with that. And we have done. We have so much work to do. I had a conversation with another mayor a couple of 3 months ago, looking at a police chief, and I said, you cannot, in good conscience, bring a white police chief unless that police chief has demonstrated with history that they will not continue the policies of the past. And we have to remember that much of our current policing policy has evolved from slave catching patrols. Yes.
Mr. Rose, I want to ask you this question. You know, years ago, just before you took office, I served, under Dr. White as the chair of voter registration and education. Had a wonderful time doing that. And like you, I didn't know it. I was registering folks outside of Fulton County. I was just trying to get everybody registered to vote, to get that point across. But what I have noticed, and of course, I'm sure that you can give some better insight to this, is that when I think about organizations such as the NAACP, I think about the long history and what they did to bring us forward, from 1909 up until now. and all the work that it put forth. But then all of a sudden, in the 60s, you had SNCC, you had SCLC, and then in the 70s, you had all these other organizations. And now, I'm just throwing a number out here. There are 150 Black organizations all doing the exact same thing on the exact same platforms every year. Why do you think, or how do we make, because I know it's relevant, but how do we make the NAACP the pinnacle of all of these organizations? We know that it's there, but how do we get people to support and be as engaged with the NAACP as they were 30 and 40 and 50 years ago? Now, you may know better than me whether or not the support is gaining, but in my personal opinion, I just think that there are too many organizations trying to do the same thing when we can put all of our focus into one, maybe two, I'll say even five. Back in the 60s, there was the big 6. Now we got the big 80, organizations out here doing it. But the big 6 was able to do more, then, and the NAACP was able to do so much more then without as many constraints as they have now. How do you see, or why do you think that that's the reason? Do people just not feel like the NAACP is relevant? I know that's not true, but do you think that's a problem? Do you think people still question the relevancy?
Some of them do. Some of them are so involved with themselves and they don't know history. They don't understand the history. Every major civil rights game since 1909 has involved the NAACP in some form or fashion. I mean, even, I had a Clark Atlanta student several years ago said, I asked her about, she asked about the NAACP. I said, well, I talked about Montgomery bus boycott. I explained to her how that the Montgomery Improvement Association came out of the local NAACP branch.
Right.
And so she said she thought SNCC had started the Montgomery bus boycott. That's what SNCC wasn't even formed then.
Not even right.
Right. And so, but let me tell you that story. My cousin, my mom's first cousin, James Bevel, came to Memphis. They're all from a little town called the Delta, Mississippi. Itabena, Belzona, Tunica, that's where it's from.
They're familiar.
And she said, he called her little sister. He said, little sister, me and some other preachers, we formed our own organization, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And she said, well, James, why would you do that? We've always had the NAACP. He said, well, the NAACP got too many rules. When we get ready to go into a town, we don't have time to check with somebody else to get permission. He said, now we still work with the NAACP, but we are strike force. We have a different mission. And once he explained to her, she accepted it. And so, my own background includes not only NAACP, but also SCLC through James Bevel and Jose Williams, the closer one I was working with, and Diane Nash, who at one time was married to James. But so you can be handicapped by structure if you allow yourself to be handicapped by structure. I will not allow a structure to dictate what I can do for the community.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's
a full circle statement from how we started this.
Right. That's right.
That's a full circle statement. That shows that I love it. Continue, please.
I like that. I like that.
So I work to I call upon all of the experiences and all of the mentoring I've had and all of the skills I may have, and I bring other folk in to do better. The genius of Dr. King is that he could have Andy Young and James Bevel and Jose Williams in the same room.
That's right.
And so, and then he has, when you look at who he had around him, Dr. Lowry, Dr. Abernathy, Wyatt T. Walker, Fred Shuttlesworth,
right.
C.T. Vivian, just just an absolute pantheon of civil rights geniuses.
Right, right.
And I try to build that with the Atlanta NAACP. I got some great business people on here. Ray McClendon is our political action chair. He does a wonderful job. Karen Renee runs the office. You know, we start off a little rocky, you know. We had and I just come from a different perspective. I'm not a pastor. I'm a numbers guy. and I work the numbers. You know, when I decided how we put together the collaboration across the state was based on numbers. I was monitoring monthly voter registration numbers because there had been a lot of voter purges here and there. And I wanted to see, because they wouldn't announce the voter purges, they would just do them, but they published what the numbers were the first of every month. Okay. And so I would download the spreadsheet and look at them. And one time I looked at them, I decided to sort them by how many Black voters were in each county. And I noticed that pretty much every month, 17 counties contain 75% of the Black voters in Georgia out of 159 counties. Now, sometime number 18 was Clark, and number 17 was Fayette, and sometime they were reversed. So we ended up grabbing 19 counties for about 77, 78%. And we ended up, you know, with about 20 because we added Columbia next to Augusta and so forth based on proximity. Right. But it's about the numbers. Where are the Black voters? Instead of not worrying about whether or not a county had majority Black, but how many Black voters did they have in that county? And that made us successful.
Okay, President Rose, I know you're a numbers guy because I didn't work with you on some. Let me tell you, Atlanta race, who's gonna be in the runoff? Because you can't get 50. Who's gonna be in that runoff? You're a numbers guy. I already know what you're gonna say, but I want to hear who's gonna be in the runoff.
Well, you know, just looking at, I think it will be Felicia Moore and Andre Dickens.
Okay. Okay.
Wow.
we own something like that. Yeah. That's who I say it's gonna be.
Yeah, that's the way I would look at it. Because the question is, so remember now, who had the highest name recognition coming into this race? Were the former mayor and Felicia Moore. Felicia Moore had a she was in runoff for city council president 4 years ago. Yeah. 4 years ago, Andre Dickens didn't have opposition, so he didn't even have to campaign. Right. And of course, the way I looked at it is this: the former mayor had 90+% name recognition, but he only had initially like 23% support. Those were the polls, right? So that meant 75% of the voters had decided they knew him and they decided they didn't want to vote for him.
Don't deal with him. They weren't gonna deal.
And so I thought it was just, I thought that he would he had nowhere to go but down. He couldn't go up because those voters already knew who he was. And so it's just a matter of who else would come out of those other packs. I knew it was Felicia Moore. The question is, would somebody else come up and outpoll the former mayor? And we've yet to see that, but based on the numbers that I've seen, that has happened. You know, that has happened.
Well, President Rose, we've come to the very bottom of the hour. We could go on another 2 hours. I mean, you before that question for Demeter, you really brought this whole conversation full circle.
Yes.
With that story about your cousin, James Bevel, and how, the policies and all the rules, can sometimes limit you from being able to do the work that needs to be done. And you, sir, are absolutely striking hard and doing the work that needs to be done despite the policies and the rules. And honestly, President Rose, that's the type of leadership that we need in an organization,
absolutely,
NAACP, and any other organization, wherever we find ourselves. leading. So I want to thank you, Demita, and I, of course, thank you so very much
Yes,
for
yes,
all of the
thank
support
you.
that you've done, all of the work that you're doing with NAACP, and thank you
Yes,
for coming on this show. We're going to have you back because tomorrow's election day, and so I need to hear your thoughts follow behind all of this. Demita, thank you as always for being
no
here.
problem.
Tag team with me, just that what this wrestling. So I tag team right there. But Mr. Rose, thank you so much for your candid conversation and for the truth that you live in and walk in every day. We appreciate you so much here at WCEG and the People's Choice. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Invite me
Thank
back.
you.
I love
Thank
the
you.
conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank
thank you
you.
for joining us here on the People's Choice on WCEG Talk Radio, the Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. We appreciate all of you for tuning in. Tomorrow is election day. Do not sit at home. Get out and exercise your right to vote. The reason that the Atlanta NAACP exists and all of organizations that follow is to push us to get out and do something that we wouldn't normally do on a day-to-day basis. And that is to exercise, not just to walk, but exercise your right to vote. Exercise the right that was given to you by being a citizen of these United States. We thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Stay tuned as WCEG has so much more to offer. Again, thank you, Demita, and thank you, President Rose.
Thank you.